Morning, discombobulated here. So, I have a couple of stories about jobs. The one thing that occurred to me just like last week, I had kind of thought about this stuff before, but I guess I sort of forgot that I thought about it and forgot that I knew it. But this one remodeling job, I think it was listed on KSL, it said $22 to $24 an hour. And then so when I talked to the guy, he asked me about an hourly wage, and then I was like, I kind of had thought, well, 23 is right in the middle of those, so I told him 23, and he seemed fine with that. But I kind of felt like I had sold myself short right away. And the reason is because then I have to start packing my tools, my miter saw, my compressor, my nail guns, and everything every day. And then I would have to drive old Rust Bucket every day. And then with the price of gas, I'd be having like a minimum of $20 a day in gas, but probably more like, say, 30, because I only get 10 miles to the gallon. And so where his shop was located in Farmington, I actually don't even know if he has a shop, but that's where he's based out of. And then he also has work in Salt Lake City, so sometimes there would be longer drives involved. But I was thinking, even if it was just $20 a day, that's $100. And then even though my pay seems really low at $16.50 an hour, and then $23 an hour sounds like a big jump up, $16.50 is actually 71% of 23. So there's only 30% more money for having to bring my tools, drive my truck, and that's also going to mean maintenance and wear and tear, like tires. And I just feel like the old Rust Bucket it's just really not roadworthy, and I really shouldn't drive it like that. It's better off if I just use it to go once in a while somewhere, go to the grocery store, that kind of thing. So so the difference between the two is only $220. So if you take off $100 for the gas, that brings it down to $120, which is hardly anything, and it cost me $30 to take the train and rock here to my job. And so I was like, wow, that's kind of some surprising math, it's probably just not worth it. And then there would be more expectations. I might be less miserable because I'd be working, but it's just like, I don't know how much it would have to be to make it worth it, but at least $25 an hour, unless my thinking's crazy. And then there's no telling if the price of gas is going to go down, or if ever going to go down. But that wear and tear thing is kind of a big deal. And then when I talked to him on the phone, he seemed kind of, I don't know if I'd say apprehensive or reluctant. And then like he asked me if I had any plumbing experience, and my first job in Florida was plumbing, and I have like tons of experience with plumbing and doing all kinds of. I used to work in these condominiums, going from unit to unit, sweating copper. They don't even do copper anymore, but you got the idea, running stuff through the walls. And so it's the same idea, although now they use PEX, but I've also got experience with the PEX. And I used to dig undergrounds and put all the piping in underneath the slabs. And when I think about it, I actually have lots of experience. But when he asked me, I was just like, fuck, man, there's this deal where I'm going to try to sell myself to this guy. And it's the same old game that I had been through before, where like I go to work for somebody, there's no benefits, there's no 401k matching. And there's only, I think he said you get 1 week off a year, which I just kind of feel like is funny when I just imagine losing another year of my life and only getting a week off. It just seems kind of absurd, And I think that was a paid week off, but I'm not even sure about that. So another job without benefits. That's how I got here in the first place, was just working for these contractors, for and never very, very good wage. It would be, I'd say, 10 years ago, the wage was like, it was maybe like, say, 16 or 17 or, I don't know. But, so if I did do this, I'd be running around town working on these remodels for this guy, and then I would just be stuck. And like in a year, I'd still be in the same spot, the same situation, so. And then, so the well drilling guy, I called him. I had taken Friday off from work here to work on my motorcycle, and I had my motorcycle front forks all torn apart in the back of my truck. I was using it for a table, and then I was like, I'm gonna call this well drilling guy. And so I called him up, and we had a good phone conversation, and then he was like, well, what are you doing now? It was like maybe like, say, 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock or something like that. And I was like, nothing. He was like, well, why don't you come out and talk to me? And he lives in a town that's like an hour away called Tooele. It's like like an hour drive. I think it was basically 60 miles. And I was like, okay. So I got off the phone, and then I remembered I had all those parts and everything and the tools strung out of the back of my truck. So I hurried up and gathered all my stuff, just kind of threw it in boxes, and went and changed my shirt and put some... I think I just went with the same pants. I just changed my shirt. And then it has been kind of hot here lately. So anyway, I set out for there on the old rust bucket. And luckily I got the wing window to kind of put some air in there. But it was kind of an adventure driving out there. And it's kind of around the corner of these mountains and everything. So... And then it's like kind of deep in this industrial park where there was like some train tracks and other buildings, and it seemed like it took forever to get there. And even when I was out there, I was like, well, I don't know how I'd be able to drive out here very often, And so I pulled up, and there wasn't like there was like an office-y looking building, but it looked like bushes and stuff kind of grown up in front of it, like it was abandoned. But I saw a well drilling rig and a big rig type truck parked out back, kind of like, say, a garage or shop. And there was a guy working on that, and I figured that he might be this guy I'm supposed to talk to, but he could just be an employee. So anyway, I pulled old Rust Bucket up right there kind of close, and then I got out and I walked over to this guy, and I said, hey, I'm looking for John. And anyway, he was like, oh, well, that's me. And so when I first saw him, he was working on this big old truck, and he was just wiping his hands off on some rags. He had just finished doing something there, and it was pretty impressive. It was almost like a country music video. He like had big arms, and he looked like kind of kind of like a country guy. And then just working on that big diesel engine was like impressive. And he had it started up, and it was just kind of sounded like it had one cylinder. It was just like boom, 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 boom. But it sounded good, but it sounded like I didn't really know how it was supposed to sound. But so he came and he stood beside me, but we made just like a little bit of small talk, and then he wasn't really saying anything. And then he looked, when he first laid eyes on me, he looked kind of like, I don't know if we could say surprised, or maybe like he didn't know what to make of me, or didn't what to make of my truck, or I don't really know what that was. But so we were just kind of standing there beside each other, and he wasn't really talking. And so I said, well, what you doing on the truck? And he said he was doing something with the air filters or something. And I was like, well, it sounds good. And then about right after I said that, just a few seconds later, all of a sudden, it quit doing that boom, 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 and it came to life, and like really sounded like normal. And so right after I told him it sounded good, then it took off, because apparently he was doing something where it was in some cycle where it was doing something and not running like it was supposed to, until I said it sounded good, and then all of a sudden it kicked it. But what I could have said, it sounds impressive. I don't know, but this kind of made me look stupid, and I really don't know anything about those big truck engines. So, but then he was just like not really saying anything, just kind of hanging out next to me, and then it felt like there was this awkward silence sometimes. So it kind of compelled me to like try to talk and make convo, and I felt like it went good, kind of, but. And then I asked him to show me the drilling rigs and what I would be lifting, because it made it sound like there was a lot of lifting. And then he showed me these things called augers. They're like 5 foot long and maybe 7 or 8 inches in diameter. And they're not super heavy, but they're heavy. I lifted one up by one side, and I said, oh, well, they don't seem too bad. He said, well, they get heavy by the end of the day. And I asked him, like, how many do you got to change in a day? He said, usually around like 50. So the job entails basically changing these screw things that go down into the earth. And then they also take samples and stuff. But he showed me the equipment and kind of gave me like a little rundown on how it works. And I liked him, even though he didn't really talk. He was just, and then maybe say 3/4 of the way through, I guess we could just say hanging out with him. It didn't even feel like an interview. But he lit up a cigarette, which I thought was kind of cool. I used to be a smoker, and I still love the way it smells. And then I had this fantasy about going back to smoking at the job. I know that just seems crazy, but... So he had a cigarette. We talked a little bit more, and I was like, hey, so do you do a gas allowance or anything? Because I said, I think it probably cost me $25 just to drive out here. And he looked at my truck. He said, well, probably more like 30. And I thought that was funny. And then he was right. It cost me $60 to drive out there and back. And then he never really was asking me too many questions. And I had to kind of pull all the information out of him. And I kind of decided maybe he thought I was too old or something right away. And then that's why he was just like, I'm not going to bother with this guy. I don't really know. I thought, well, maybe he's just kind of a quiet guy and he's not into doing interviews. At least he wasn't asking me what my hobbies were, my greatest weakness, or some bullshit like that, And so I just kind of sensed that, things were kind of winding up. So I shook his hand and thanked him for his time. And he had a real nice handshake. I really liked his handshake. And then, so I got in the old rust bucket and was driving back. And I didn't, because my fuel gauge doesn't work, I thought I better stop and get some gas. So I went to like a Maverick there. Went inside, and when I came back out, I noticed a lot of oil dripping from underneath my truck, like more than usual. And I was like, what's going on? But I had a can of oil or bottle of oil to put in, so I put that in and figured all that ought to get me home, And then when I was driving back, I was like, God damn it, Brian, you came out here, you spent all this money on gas, and then put all these miles on old rust bucket, and then it looks like nothing's come of it. And so I kind of started crashing out a little bit. I was like, damn it. And then as I got closer to home, the truck started backfiring and running real rough. Like my door panel was even shaking because it was kind of missing. And then when I first got off the freeway next to my house, it came to a stop, and it was like it wanted to die. So I kind of had to nurse it to get home. And then I was so depressed when I got home. I was like, wow. And I was just thinking, this really probably wouldn't work for me anyways out here. It's just such a long drive. But so I don't know. He said he would call me this week, but I don't know. It's that thing again where there's all the gas money and everything, and how I was thinking, well, how much would he have to pay me? It'd have to be at least $25 an hour to do it. Then maybe I could just drive out there and spend the night at this reservoir out there and kind of camp out and work, or I don't know. But since then, I've been kind of wanting to go back to that shop and hang out with them and work with them. And I don't know what that's about, but so I don't know. Just feeling kind of lost today. Not sure what my next move is, but just kind of felt like talking about it. Well, thanks for listening to me.